Our vocabulary today for 2.2 is inverse operations. Inverse operations means two operations that undo each other. I like to think of the word opposite. And this is what you're going to hear me use in class. For example, if we're talking addition, the opposite or inverse would be subtraction. If we're talking about multiplying, the opposite or inverse would be division. Equivalent expressions are expressions that have the same solution. So they are equal. Look at the word equivalent. It looks very similar to equal. And reciprocal is something you learned about earlier. It's about flipping a fraction upside down. They are the multiplicative inverse of each other. When you multiply these two, you end up with a product of 1. For example, 2/3, the reciprocal would be 3/2. If we were to multiply, we would get 6/6, which equals 1. But I want you to focus on flipping that fraction upside down. Our goal in 2.2 is to be able to solve equations using algebra. We have a couple of examples here. I have no doubt that many of you can do these right now in your head. The issue is we need to see your work on paper. You have to show your work to get credit. So number one, you always start by writing the problem. Remembering whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. And I want to think about inverse or opposite operations. I'm adding 7. The opposite would be to subtract 7. 7 minus 7 cancels. 10 minus 7 gives me 3. My goal is to get variables on one side, numbers on the other. So in problem number 2, I have x minus 5 equals 3. Minus 5, the inverse or opposite would be plus 5. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So these cancel. 3 plus 5 gives me 8. Number 8 gets a little more complicated. We have 24 equals negative 8n. Remember, a number next to a variable means to multiply. The opposite of inverse of multiplying would be to divide. So we're going to divide both sides by negative 8. These cancel. So on my variable side, I'm left with n. 24 divided by negative 8 leaves me with negative 3. The steps are important. You have to show all your work to get full credit. Number 9 is when we tend to really run into problems. We start with t divided by negative 3 equals 9. The opposite of dividing by negative 3 is to multiply by negative 3. So we're going to multiply both sides by negative 3. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. These cancel and give me 1, so I'm left with t. 9 times negative 3 gives me negative 27. Same thing if we take a look at number 10. We have 6 equals c divided by 7. The opposite of dividing by 7 is to multiply by 7. So I need to multiply both sides by 7. This side, my 7's cancel, so I'm left with 42 equals c. I'm going to actually jump to the next page here where we have a few more. A divided by 5 equals negative 11. A divided by 5 equals negative 11. The opposite of dividing by 5, the inverse, is to multiply by 5. 5 over 1 times A over 5 equals negative 11 times 5. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. These cancel and I'm left with A. Negative 11 times 5 gives me negative 55. 13 is a little interesting. We got to look at it. We have 5, 6 times W equals 10. So the opposite of multiplying by 5, 6 is to divide by 5, 6. And this is where our key term reciprocal is going to come into play. 5, 6 divided by 5, 6 leaves me with W here. Now, I'm going to actually switch colors because I want to focus on 10 divided by 5, 6. Remember your rules. I know Mrs. Mullins taught them to you in 6th grade. 10 over 1, it stays. We multiply and we use the reciprocal, or we flip it upside down. Multiplying fractions straight across. 10 times 6 would be 60. 1 times 5 would be 5. 60 over 5 in its best form, if we reduce, our answer would be 12. So we're going to look at number 14. 2/3 times P equals 14. The opposite of multiplying by 2/3 is to divide by 2/3. These cancels. 2/3 divided by 2/3. Any number divided by itself is 1. Over here, again, I'm going to switch colors so you can see what we're doing here. We have 14 over 1 divided by 2/3. 14 over 1 times 3 over 2. 3 times 4 would be 12. 1 times 3 is 3. With my carry would be 42 over 2. Running out of room here. I divide. I have 42 over 2. My final answer in its best form, 42 divided by 2, is going to give me 21. Here's our wrap up. This is to show me that you have mastered solving equations using algebra. So I'm going to give you a chance to work on these, and you can come back then and check your answers. So if you have -6 plus a equals -2, you add 6 to both sides, you end up with a equals 4. Problem number 2, 8 equals m minus 7. How do I get this -7 or -7 to the other side? The opposite of -7 is to add 7. So we're going to add 7, and we end up with 15 equals m. And then finally, we have 9k equals -72. I'm multiplying. The opposite or inverse of multiplying is to divide. My 9's cancel. -72 divided by 9. 9 times what gives me 72? 9 times 8. So the answer here is 8.